I'm curious if you're aware of the approaches that you take into these debates, how you handle insults and that sort of thing.
Yeah, super analytical and very deliberate. There are multiple layers to a debate. You don't only have to manage the logical discourse back and forth. You also have to manage the meta expectations of what's going on in the conversation as well. Have you ever been involved in like internet drama stuff before?
I've avoided it pretty well.
Okay, this is the worst thing to ever hear. Everybody that's ever told me this. And you guys all know this too. One of the big benefits about religion is it gives you a metaphysical, a way of like understanding like what things are. It gives you an epistemic, a way to like evaluate what is true and false, how to understand knowledge, and an ethical view of the world. You get all three of these things completely solved for you. You know, the world is what the Bible says it is. Truth is what God tells you. Ethics are the 10 Commandments. You get everything solved for you, and you don't have to worry about any of that dumb shit, and then you can just go and live your life.
That is such an anxiety reducer. First question, I've seen a ton of your debates lately. I thought you handled yourself quite well, for instance, the Milo debate, where he started off with it was wild. I felt triggered on your behalf when he just came at your wife extremely hard out of the gate, obviously a calculated thing. I know what I saw. Have you seen the videos that I've made in the past at all? The Charisma on Command videos?
I watched a couple when I was going to your first podcast a long time ago, but yeah.
So the general idea is, I mean, I look in a very analytical way at social situations and see if I can figure out the rules that underlie them. You know, it's a bit of an Aspergery approach to it, but it was what I had to do when I was in high school, trying to like piece together what the hell I was not understanding about how to get girls to like me. And I started to do that watching you. I'm curious if you're aware of the approaches that you take into these debates, how you handle insults and that sort of thing.
Yeah, super analytical and very deliberate. There's a huge, every time a topic like this comes, like 15 things pop in my mind.
Yeah, so let's like break it out. So first off, I think there's a difference between debates to persuade an audience and debates to change someone's mind. So
absolutely,
I imagine when you walk into that with Milo, you're like, I'm not trying to change Milo's mind.
Typically, usually like something I've been really big on lately is matching energy. So I try to be very reactive to the person that I'm dealing with. I try to be very reactive and that's probably true in social situations too. I'll come in, I've got like a certain style that I prefer, but like I'll listen to you and I'll go with your energy and then I'll try to like follow and maybe like lead by my following, even depending on how that person wants to interact. So if you watch that Milo debate, I opened up very respectful, very kind, very courteous, despite the fact that he was so busy doing blow in the bathroom and being a diva. He was like an hour and a half late. For a bunch of like college kids. So he like charged like thousands of dollars to come out and do this debate for. And I'm like, bro, like I'm bigger than you now. I didn't charge these kids anything. I'm here on time. Like how rude to like do this to these guys. But yeah, I waited, I was respectful. But then as soon as he started opening up with the personal attacks, then obviously it affords me a bit of room to be a little bit nasty as well. And if somebody wants to get really dirty, I'll roll in the mud if you want to, depending. So yeah. So once somebody, it's kind of like, have you ever seen the YouTube channel Every Frame a Painting?
Yeah.
Have you seen the episode on Jackie Chan?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched almost all their videos. So
okay, I have too.
Yeah.
There's a part in the Jackie Chan one that he points out that's very good, and it's very satisfying from a heroic perspective. That when you're watching heroes fight villains, the hero almost always starts off from behind and has to catch up, and that makes the victory, one, it gives them the moral authority to fight because the other person is like more powerful. Usually they're up to no good, and two, it gives you a very satisfying end.
No matter what film, Jackie always starts beneath his opponents. He has no shoes. He's handcuffed. He has a bomb in his mouth. From this point, he has to fight his way back to the top. Each action creates a logical reaction.
And I've noticed that when I engage with certain people, if I come out of the gate really hard, I can be very overwhelming, very overbearing. I can destroy somebody. If you want to see that person get destroyed, it's cool.
Yeah.
But it just kind of looks a little like, ugh. But if I wait for the other person to lead, be a little bit nasty to me, then I can start to like ramp up my stuff. But the other person always looks more unhinged than me because I'm always being responsive to them rather than coming over the top and be like, this is Milo, he's a piece of shit, let's go, which would afford him the opportunity to come at me. And then I would look like the one that was instigating everything. So I'm very deliberate when I think about all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny you use the word reactivity because I see it in a different way. I was seeing non-reactivity, which is he insulted your wife. You didn't answer that. You just continued with whatever your statement was. And I thought, I've seen you in a handful of podcasts. You've got a number of ways that you handle insults, but one of them is I see you saying, yes, I will match their energy and maybe return an insult, but I'm not going to fight or deny or struggle against the shitty bucket that you've put me in. Because I think, at that point now you're debating whether or not, I don't know, just somewhere you don't want to be in the conversation.
I'll usually bring something to an equal level. Like I think with Milo, what did I start digging on? The
You went with the cancellation and the
something like that.
You eventually hit him with the cocaine in the bathroom.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I started to, there was something that I said, and the pedophile stuff. And then he was like, what did you say? And I was like, I said this. What do you want to say about it? And then he just like stared at me for 20 seconds and then continued on. Yeah.
I don't think you can tell when it pops out whether it's going to like or not. Maybe if it's your kid, but I'm sure you'll ensure that's the case.
I mean, you know all about kids liking, huh? Isn't that?
Would I tell us more about that? Would I? Because that's a pretty big allegation. Would I?
Would you what?
Would I know about that?
Well, seems like it. Isn't that what you got canceled for?
No, I got canceled for talking about the fact that I was a victim of clerical sexual abuse.
So about like little boys liking, right?
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, yeah.
There you go. You got there eventually. It's okay.
Okay.
I can tell you're coming down right now, but I'll walk you through the rest of my jokes if you need me to.
No, fair enough. Okay. Are you bringing it? Fine.
Another common thing that I saw, you just had the Whatever podcast with about abortion, and in that it echoed something I saw in the Milo, which was this "How dare you" statement came up in both of them. How dare you?
Yeah.
And it seemed in both of them super disingenuous. And I'm just curious if you've sensed that in the moment, and you seem to just steam right through it.
I'll just laugh at it. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and like play games around some moral grandstanding. Like if I've actually mortally wounded or offended your psyche on some shit, like it needs to be some like really deep stuff. Like if I'm like making fun of a dead parent or like some tragedy, then I can understand that. But the like, how dare you do this politically? It's like the oldest trick in the book. And I'm like, we're not politicians here running for city council or something like this. Isn't going to do anything in this conversation with me.
It's crazy, but there is that, I don't suspect that the women that you were speaking with thought about this in advance, but there was a performative aspect. So people seem to intuit that when you're in a debate, you are performing. And one of the ways that you can win this performance is by assuming the role of victim incredibly powerfully. So like setting someone up to have hurt you in a way that is too grievous for you to continue. And I've seen even people that I respect, like Christopher Hitchens used to do this when he would talk about Christianity. How dare you say the blah, 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 and talk about all the evils at the feet of Christianity. And it is when the audience is
Stephen
stunned.
Fry did that same thing when somebody asked him, like, what would you say to God when you get to heaven? He's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Child cancer? Yeah, I remember.
It's powerful, you know, and the demonstration of moral indignancy is an incredibly powerful thing, even though it shouldn't be a strong logical thing. So I'm curious how you think about debates, because clearly, well, maybe you don't think this, what wins a debate is not necessarily the best argument or the most sound logical approach to it. There is a bit of performance art that's going on. Is that something that you think about?
I wouldn't say that it's so much a performance art. I would say that there are multiple layers to a debate, and you don't only have to manage the logical discourse back and forth. You also have to manage the meta expectations of what's going on in the conversation as well. So I realized like about 20 or 30 minutes into that debate that this logically, I felt like I had the upper hand, because typically when people start engaging in like a lot of crazy argumentation, it's because they know they can't come back to you logically. So I knew logically I had the upper hand. So then the rest of the time I'm like writing this paper, I'm trying to figure out like, how do I manage this on a meta level? Because this is going to be like a shit show otherwise. So I'm trying to think like, do I need to go really hard on the insults? Should I start screaming at them and cut them off? Should I just be quiet and let them continue to interrupt me so I look good for the camera? Should I appeal to the moderator? Like I'm trying to think of like all these things as they're like shouting at me to figure out like
what did you come to? What was the sort of conclusion that you found?
At some point, there were a few points that I wanted to finish. So I'm like, I need to, if they're going to keep cutting me off, I'll let them cut me off for a while. But at some point I need to say like, I'm going to finish this. Let me finish this. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to finish this. I did that a few times. When the one lady was like, I'm going to treat you like a child. I'm like, okay, well, I'll be a child then. Like kind of like be a little bit memey, fun with it or whatever.
Well, you yes-ended several of the insults, which I thought was...
Yeah, anytime somebody pulls out like, you're misogynistic, I'm like, yeah, I am. Yeah.
I don't know. I've never talked to a misogynistic man like this before.
Okay. All right. She's just accused you of being misogynistic. I mean, do you have a response to that?
I am.
I don't think he has one.
Well, no, come on, B.
I'm being honest.
You're not a misogynist, Destiny.
I hate women.
And it's getting worse by the moment. You added to it, and it diffused it so quickly in that.
Yeah, before the cameras were rolling, I admit I'm a little edgy. I was being a little edgy too. But like one of the women across the table from me, I didn't know she was trying to set up something for the debate. She was like, I heard you defend the N-word in private. And I was like, oh, no, I defended in public too. And she was like, why would you ever say that? And I'm like, well, sometimes black people just really piss me off. And then she didn't have anything else to say. And it was like, we just rolled into it. And like, I could tell both of them were like a little bit irked by the answer. Like, oh, I don't know. What do you want me, like, what the like, we're not doing this right now.
But behind that is the sense that this is not a good faith engagement. So I'm not going to give you my actual justifications and reasons for some of these things. I'm going to play into the worst stereotype that you are implying that I fall into to kind of prove to you that you don't even care. You're just looking for some sort of moral victory. Or
a little bit. It's also like choosing, like it's like choosing your battle arena. You like, if somebody is trying to pull you into a certain area, this is a huge problem I used to have. I don't know if this is ADHD or if it was just my like hubris, but generally when I'm having a debate with somebody, I'm usually pretty informed of the topic and I'm willing to follow them around anywhere they want to go. Like, we can start a debate about Donald Trump and end up at the World Economic Forum, whatever. I'll go wherever you want to go because we can do that. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm confident, I know the material and that's fine. But when I realize this on a meta conversational level, what's actually happening is I'm not actually solidifying any wins in the eyes of any audience, because anytime I'm getting close on one area, they'll pivot to another topic until invariably they will find something that I don't know much about and I'll get stumped on an issue. And then the first real L, because I'm not going to just pivot to something else if I don't know, I'll be like, okay, I'm not sure. I look like I've taken an L after an hour of them running from topic to topic to topic. So if somebody wants to drag me to a certain area, like, oh, you're a misogynist, I'm like, okay. And like, I'll just like move past it because I don't want to have that fight right there, right now, because that's just not what I'm looking to have a battle over.
Yeah. And I've sensed, and I don't know if this is because you don't want to fight, but you have a way of not taking L's by employing the same thing, which somebody will say something and you'll just go, okay. You know, and there's this sense that you're communicating is, this is almost, I'm too tired of this. This is frustrating or beneath my intellectual engagement at this point.
A little bit, but you have to be careful with that too, because like something that I used to do that I've tried not to do as much is sometimes I'll be going down such a dumb line of argumentation and it's like so frustrating. At the end, I'll just be like, okay, sure.
Okay.
And then move on to the next thing. And maybe in the eyes of my audience, it looks like, okay, like obviously this guy's dumb, he's moving on. But I think to a neutral audience and to the other person's audience, it looks like I'm giving up because I know I've lost the point. So that's like a meta thing I have to manage as well. Like I can't do that. That's why I don't know if I did any abortion debate. I think I did, but after somebody finishes a ramble, I try not to let people just finish their thing and be like, okay, I usually, and I think I might have even explicitly said, I can't let them just do their whole thing and get their point off. Like I am going to restate my argument until we move on to the next thing. Because if I just let them restate and I go, okay, fine, and we move on, it's going to look to the audience like I'm agreeing with them or I've like given up arguing my point, you know?
Yeah. And within all of this is the idea that you're not taking steps to open your interlocutor up as much as possible. You understand that the goal is not like they're probably, because we're on camera and representing an organization, have an entrenched position that is not going to move. We're not going to cover new ground in their mind. They're going to fight that.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking to an audience who is responding to, there's a bit of like power cues in this. Who's taking L's, who's winning, and that is how they're forming their worldview from a place of a bit more receptivity because they're sitting in the comfort of their own home.
Yeah. Like if I'm arguing about topic X with a person who's the head of organization, we support X to the death.
Yeah.
Like you're not changing your mind. I'm not going to have a debate with Donald Trump and convince him to be a Democrat. I'm not going to have a debate with Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton and convince them to, be a free market absolutionist, capitalist, like Republican. Like, yeah. So I understand people in certain positions of, influence or ideological organization are going to suffer some degree of audience capture to where they're expected to give certain answers and they have to give certain answers and there's no maneuverability in their forum. So I'm just there to explore how deeply have you thought about this. And then once I've hit that rock bottom, I make my case to the audience, then we kind of move on.
Do you feel that present in your streams, the audience capture for you?
Absolutely not. My audience hates some of the takes that I have.
Okay.
To this day, some of my takes from my audience are really unpopular. But I'm not like ideologically owned by anything. So I have a lot more flexibility to kind of like grow and change and move. Like I call myself like the omni-liberal because I'm like, broadly speaking, I'm a liberal, but I try to take like good positions from other people. Like I like guns a lot. I'm a very big proponent of like self-defense and defense of property. I'm really big on like expanded taxation for good social programs. Like I've got like a lot of views all over the place, but I justify them all from like an internal schema that I make available to the public. And yeah, I don't have to worry about like, if somebody brings me up a really good argument for like, Steven, I know that you like guns a lot, but here are really compelling reasons why we should probably get rid of guns. I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll probably change my mind on it then. That's a good argument. Like I'm not like an NRA card carrying member or like a Republican advocate that works for the RNC where I have to have these positions or else I'm threatening some aspect of my income or my livelihood. My audience looks to me to be Stephen Bunnell and to have Stephen Bunnell's point of view, not to be a progressive or a conservative or a liberal or whatever.
What about ego attachment to winning or losing, or do you notice or feel that in yourself?
Not much, because I never lose an argument, so I don't really have to worry
So
about
yeah,
the ego thing.
that could never happen.
I try to employ strategies to manage my ego, especially when I debate with so many idiots. It's very hard not to feel very egotistical sometimes, but like I try to be very careful, and I try to qualify my positions very carefully when I'm having certain conversations. So a really good example recently are the Tates. I very much believe that they are guilty of sex trafficking, assuming everything they've said in the YouTube videos is true. They've laid out everything. But I think they should have.
Do you want to take a minute just to talk about that? I've mentioned it on the podcast, but
yeah, basically Andrew Tate has very explicitly detailed how he utilizes women that he's got sexual relationships with to bring in other women that he's promised, monogamous marriages to, that he's asked for servitude and loyalty from. When he brings them in, he'll bring in his bottom bitch. He'll have that bottom bitch convince the girl to start doing sex work, and then he'll get them kind of like enrolled in these programs. He talks about how he defrauds them on their taxes to steal more money from them than what he originally takes. And then there's a whole bunch of other accusations in those indictments.
And this is in like a course that he had. I saw something on YouTube.
I don't even know if that was a course. I think that was just him talking.
Sure,
in
it was him
YouTube
talking
videos.
at the camera.
He's giving courses as well.
I was blown away by some of the things.
But when I say this, again, I'm very careful to say if
that's true.
If he's true, he could be just lying for the camera. That's possible.
That could be cool guy stuff.
Yeah. And it should still have to be proven in court beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's the standard the world uses generally for criminal convictions, which I support. So because I've given those qualifications, if it does come out that he is acquitted in court because either he was lying to the camera or they just don't have evidence, then it's very easy for me to look back and say, well, hey, this is my position all along. He should have a day in court. He won, so he won, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's it. I think it's very careful when you have positions to qualify them so that you have space to move away from them, given the level of conviction you have for that idea. So like, for instance, right now, my position on abortion, you saw me argue. My position on abortion is, I think that conscious beings should be preserved. Conscious human thought should be preserved. But if you don't even have that capacity for conscious human thought, then you're not worthy of moral consideration. So corpses have lost that capacity. Brain dead, comatose people in persistent vegetative states have lost that. And fetuses before 20 weeks have lost that. Mm-hmm. But let's say somebody came up with a study like, hold on, Steven, you said you're pro-choice in the first trimester. Here's a new scientific study that showed that fetuses, 100%, they have conscious thought by 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Then I would go, oh, okay, well, that's my marker for when it should be preserved. So I would say I'm probably against abortion now.
Yeah.
But because of the qualifications I've given before, I can very easily move off that position without feeling some egotistical attachment to it, to where, well, now if the position is attacked, now you're attacking my character, and people aren't going to suffer character attacks. I'm not going to. So now you're like roped into fighting for this position, like you're fighting for your life because you're so closely identified with it.
Yeah. It sounds like your positions are, to the best degree possible, built from philosophical foundations upwards to policy, upwards to what we know to be true.
Yeah, and then the conviction matches like the fundamentalness of the belief. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't have a strong attachment at all to capitalism. Mm-hmm. I just think it happens to be the best organization of an economy right now. I do have a very strong attachment and a high conviction to creating a society that serves the interests and needs of most people to the best of our abilities without working to the detriment of too many people. Mm-hmm. I feel very strongly about that. Capitalism is a good tool for it. But if you show me that like a fully socialist utopia would actually work better, I can abandon capitalism immediately. I'm not like a hardcore capitalist. I mean, I am in that I support it, but only insofar as it serves those fundamental philosophical positions. And if you show me something that serves those positions better, then I'll change, because that's what I really care about.
Why is that hard for people to do?
Generally because most people don't super ground out their positions philosophically. They tend to inherit what I would call like trees or systems of belief from other people. Mm-hmm. And typically what will happen is if you say one thing, it lights up a whole bunch of tangential things, and all of these things like a ball of yarn are tied together, and you can't really give on any of them without all of it falling apart. So for instance, if I say like, let's talk about like 15 an hour minimum wage. If I'm having a talk with an intelligent person that's thought about it, they might say 15 an hour minimum wage is beneficial because there is some NBER studies that show that when you raise the minimum wage to a certain level, workers are paid more, benefits are already, companies aren't hurt that much. Okay, fine. Most people will say 15 an hour minimum wage is important because we need to pay a living wage. Mm-hmm. As soon as I've heard somebody say living wage, I know they probably think corporations are evil. They probably think workers and unions are good. They probably think the government is generally against the people and is taking the sides of corporate. Like, they have all these other beliefs, and all of these beliefs are usually tied in a little bit to that 15 an hour minimum wage. So for me to get them off of 15 an hour minimum wage, what they really have to do is deconstruct a whole bunch of other thoughts that they have built in. It could be similarly too, if I'm arguing with right-leaning people, I like to give a left and right example. So I'm not being partisan. If I could be a right-leaning person, we might argue about vaccines, right? For me to argue with them and convince them that the vaccine isn't horrible, well, to them, the vaccine is bad because Fauci and the FDA are corrupt, because the deep state runs everything, because the WF and Klaus Schwab, right? For them to roll over on the vaccine, they would also have to undo all that other stuff. So I think that's the issue. Usually when you're arguing with people, you're not arguing with somebody that has discreetly like established a bunch of different policy positions from a really strong philosophical base. You're arguing with somebody that's inherited like a collection of ideas and beliefs that are all like interdependent on one another.
Yeah. And what I see is that often that collection is tied to tribal alignment.
Oftentimes.
And this is how I fit in my church growing up, or this is how I fit in my progressive group of friends in college. And like, you're actually threatening my survival socially.
Yes.
To start to disown and disinherit some of these beliefs. And that is, why the f would I put myself at risk for this conversation?
That's why I thought I brought this up, I think, actually in another show this week where you've seen Men in Black, I trust, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's that conversation in the park that Kay has with Jay, where Jay says, why don't you just tell people that aliens are real? And Kay says, they couldn't handle it. And Jay says, well, I think people are smart. They could handle it. And then Kay says, a person is smart and people are stupid.
People are smart. They can handle it. A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
And I spent a lot of time this last month thinking about that quote, like why? And I think the answer that I kind of came to was the reason why is because we are, by default, we are very, very, very social creatures. By nature, this is why like scams and con artists work. By nature, we want to like appease the person in front of us. We want to like feel like we're communicating and connecting with people. When you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you can get some very reasonable opinions from them. You're giving your take, hopefully in an empathetic way. They're understanding you and hearing you because like it's a one-on-one human interaction. There's a lot of reward there for coming to an agreement and understanding each other. But once they're gone and they go back to a social group, there is almost zero reward. In fact, there's a lot of punishment there for being empathetic to an outside party, but there's so much social reward for buying into the group. And it's that social reward you get for fully buying into the ideas of a group that you're in. I think that's what keeps people locked into tribalistic ways of thinking. And that's where you can pull somebody away from the group, have a really reasonable conversation with them. And then once they run back to the group, they're right back on what they were saying before. Did you see the big red pill debate I had with Rollo Tomasi and Michael? Yeah. I said that, and I knew this would happen, and it did happen. I'm very firm on the things I believe. I said multiple times in that debate, hey, listen, because they kept saying, oh, we really agree. Oh, we really agree a lot. Oh, we really agree. And I said explicitly, I said, listen, you're saying that we really agree now, but when I go back to my people, I'm going to say the exact same stuff. You guys are going to start changing up a lot.
This is a debate tactic of yours that I've noticed, which is the Babe Ruth.
You guys aren't disagreeing with each other. You're just saying volume is the biggest driving factor, which means you have to go out there and talk to them. You're correct.
Sure, we can agree, but I don't believe in the dual mate thing at all.
Okay,
I don't believe in alpha fucks, beta bucks at all.
Okay.
I don't believe that status and class are your major determining factors for fucking. So if you want to say you agree with me, that's fine. But when I go back to my stream, I'm going to have this exact same message. I don't know if you guys, when you're on your other panelists, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, like it doesn't really matter if you're that tall, you make that much money. The real drive is that you're actually going out there and trying to fuck women.
Calling your shot, telling them what's going on.
I will. I'm gonna say exactly because I want to make the audience aware of like the meta stuff. I'm not trying to, when I track meta conversations, I'm not trying to trick people. It's because I want people to be abundantly clear.
How predictable people are and how enslaved they are to ideology or social conformity.
Yeah.
When you say, look, I'm going to do this, you're going to give me this, but you will back out and you will start insulting me as soon as we get to here. It's like the level of predictability in you, it shows that you're not operating as an individual. You are operating as a predictable cog of an ideology or something. But continue. So this was happening with Rollo.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, like, I just to summarize, I understand the social rewards of why people in groups act certain ways, because, like you said, why the f would I branch out and like think for myself or have some ideas that don't belong to the group when there's so much reward, so much punishment for it, almost no reward. Like your reward is like personally satisfying enrichment of like whatever. Like who really cares like that much, right?
Truth, who needs it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, truthfully, right? Yeah. But where, like the social reward is like so much more. Yeah, it's so much more valid. To people.
Yeah. Look, if you have to choose between truth and social cohesion will keep you alive.
Of course.
And truth very well may not. So there's, there's an inbuilt predisposition towards one over the other.
Yeah.
I think.
It's like, I don't know if have you ever been involved in like internet drama stuff before?
I've avoided it pretty well.
Okay. This is the worst thing to ever hear. Everybody that's ever told me this.
Right people do this. Camera,
yeah, people do this all the time. And you guys all know this too. Every streamer, every YouTuber knows this. The worst fucking message you ever get from somebody is when you're going through some crazy shit and you know it's stupid that other people are being dumb, and people message you like, hey dude, I just want you to know, like, I really support you. And it's like, why the fuck are you telling me this privately? If you really support me, why don't you go out on Twitter and put your neck out for me, motherfucker? Don't sit here and say like, oh, I support you. I wish I could say, like, your shit doesn't mean anything then, you know? Yeah, people do that all the time. Because like individually, they might know, like, listen, like, I got your back. Like, I know this is fucked up. But publicly, they're not going to say shit. Because the social punishment there is so huge for it.
Couple of thoughts to come up that you were asking. I've asked myself the question, why is a person smart but people are dumb, unruly animals? One of the thoughts, which I don't know if this gels, is that there's that quote, like, the best lack all conviction while the worst have it in spades. And the idea that there's this like, I think it's a healthy tendency towards openness allows you to assimilate more and arrive at truth over the course of a long lifetime. But what leads, we have 5 traits that are typically very charismatic, and high conviction is one of them. That's your Conor McGregor. That's your Donald Trump. That's your Andrew Tate, who is so certain about how everything in the world is going to work. And it's not that he's right about the world, it's that he has high conviction. And when people who have high degrees of openness or are more uncertain, you know, whoever in the group has the most conviction winds up leading oftentimes. And it is not because they are closer to the truth or the most moral way of being, but because they believe it more fully.
This is something that I wrestled with a lot, because regardless of like how egotistical, I guess some people think I come off, I am really humble in terms of like, I know the extent of my knowledge really well. One issue that I ran into because of that is like, if I'm in a debate, somebody brings in something I genuinely am stumped by or don't know, I'll admit it. I'm like, I'm not sure about this. I don't know. Yeah, you might be right on this. But if I'm against somebody else, most people I argue with have such high conviction on everything, even if they have no idea what they're talking about. And it automatically makes me look weak to be more intellectually humble there. So I had to find strategies around that sort of thing, because it was making me look bad in debates against people that were just wrong. For a little while, I tried this in 2 conversations. For a little while, I would just flat out lie. I would have somebody debate me and they would say something, they'd bring up like an econ study. They'd be like, don't you know that like for minimum wage, don't you know that it's true that when you raise minimum wage, there was a study done, I think in like the 2000s or whatever in Massachusetts, where they showed that when they raised the minimum wage, it actually hurt a ton of businesses. I would just flat out say, like, I've actually seen that study. You're completely wrong. It says the exact opposite. Every single time I did that, the person was like, oh, okay, maybe. And then they backed off it immediately. And I'm like, is that easy? Do they have no idea what
the depth of your understanding?
Yeah, they just, I guess they had no idea about it. But I stopped that pretty soon, obviously, because I don't want to like be known as like.
That's not how you want to win.
Yeah.
But usually, you know what? You could probably make a career of that. The level that you would get to before you even got
called out.
And by the way, by that time, you'd have 43% of the population just totally at your back.
Yeah. Basically, what I started doing is now when somebody says that, now I'll qualify heavily like my opinion. Somebody's like, oh, what do you know this? Usually I'll say, I don't think you're right. I'm pretty sure you're lying about this study. I'm pretty sure I'm going to look this up afterwards, and it's going to be the exact opposite of what you're telling me, which usually encourages the audience to start looking immediately. And I'll see people like pop up with answers sometimes. They're like, oh yeah, it was completely opposite. And then I'll say like, if that's true, given what you're saying is true, then I probably would think a little bit different about this. But this is something that I need to research on my own, because every time I'm provided data on a subject like this, it's always the exact opposite of what you're telling me. So that's usually how I'll qualify that if it's truly something outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah. Going back just a bit, I was thinking about audience capture and how you've handled it. I was reminded of Jordan Peterson. No, I actually liked a lot of what he says. Short term is obviously not beneficial to fall out of line with whatever group you are. And you have to, he's got, I think, some issues with audience capture as well. Yeah. So I acknowledge. But he also is a strong advocate for, I think when he did stand up and disagree with his professors, that was what carved out a new career for him. And when I think of the difference between you and a Fox News anchor, you get to be you professionally forever, because you have resisted I will not be a Democrat or Republican or this or that or a mouthpiece for this. And so I get to be me, and you're here. If you're still here, you're here for me. Versus if it's a Fox News anchor and you have a different opinion, you're just gone and nobody cares because they never were there for you. Exactly. They were there for a mouthpiece of the ideology. And so I think that pattern of, yes, there's tremendous short-term benefit for blending in with the group, saying what it is, and there's a short-term cost over a long enough timeline in a safe enough world, which I think we generally live in. You are far better suited to be an individual and say what you think. Do you disagree?
I don't know for everybody. I'm not sure. Okay. I wrestle with that a lot. One of the big things I've been struggling with recently is trying to figure out, like, one thing that Red Pill does really well is it gives people like a whole way to view the world. One of the big benefits about religion is it gives you a metaphysical, a way of like understanding like what things are. It gives you an epistemic, a way to like evaluate what is true and false, how to understand knowledge, and an ethical view of the world. You get all three of these things completely solved for you. The world is what the Bible says it is. Truth is what God tells you. Ethics are the 10 Commandments. You get everything solved for you, and you don't have to worry about any of that dumb shit. And then you can just go and live your life.
That is such an anxiety reducer. I don't even think people acknowledge the tremendous. I mean, some people who might have left religion have had these crises moments. The amount of anxiety that enters into your system when you go, "Holy cow, these big questions are unanswered," is insane. So solving them in one fell swoop is pretty psychologically tempting.
Yeah. So I think that's why those movements are so successful. So like I think Red Pill movement does a lot of similar things. It's very difficult for me to combat those movements because I'm very discreet with all of my thoughts. Like they don't all come from one ideological movement. So I can, in some ways it'll seem like I'm all over the map on things. But in other ways, like if you understand my philosophical foundations, like it's pretty easy to guess what my opinions about a given topic will be. But it's hard because sometimes people will ask me like, oh, like what should I think about a given thing? And usually I'll say, well, like give me your core values and I'll give you probably the direction that you should head. But they don't always have those worked out. So they're really just asking me like, the last thing I want is I don't really want my audience to copy my policy positions. I kind of want them to copy my thought process. And if we end up disagreeing at the end of the day on some policy positions, that's fine. But I don't want you just like repeating verbatim, like, because one, I might change my mind because other data will come out. And two, I kind of defeats the entire purpose of my whatever political project, whatever you call my channel, if you're just like treating me as like another Fox News anchor. Like, oh, what is my ideology? Whatever Destiny says, right? That's not like
Well, recently, I think it's interesting that you say that because you've got the political, and I think that was a huge piece of what you did. There's so much more social aspect of what you're doing. You're talking a lot with the Red Pill. And I've heard you say that they don't address relationships. There's a lot of things that are taken they don't matter to the Red Pill movement because it's up until you have sex with her and then maintain frame. I'm curious, this is perhaps broad, but we can narrow in on it. What you would recommend broadly as an approach to interactions with women from men, like what is not the antidote to the Red Pill, but what is a competing view of the world that people can live through?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time.
It's like, leave this and go where? Wow.
The issue is that like they have like such a compelling narrative to describe the whole world. I would argue that it's a bad narrative because like all bad narratives, it makes really bad predictions. A good narrative is one that will give you accurate predictions of how people will behave or how the world will respond to what you're doing. And I don't think anything in the Red Pill predicts anything good. You follow the Red Pill to a T. It's not like, you remember like the PUA scenes and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I didn't like them, at the very least, I could say, like, if you follow a lot of PUA shit, you'll probably get laid. I don't think that's true with the Red Pill. I don't think it's going to give you any success with women, any success with relationships.
What is the difference between PUA and Red Pill? I don't know enough of I thought that they were like closely related to
I think Red Pill kind of can review it, but PUA seemed to like acknowledge like these are the ways that you can kind of get women. These are the
things to say, things to
wear,
the
like little psychological tricks
to do. Yeah.
Red Pill has gotten to this whole weird, crazy world of like sexual market value and like high value men can juggle multiple women and women like to be cheated on because it makes them more competitive. And you need 50 women by the time you're 35 so that you can settle down with a virgin to get married and have a family. But also you should never get married because all women are looking to your life over in divorce. So you shouldn't even live with your significant other to avoid common law marriage. It's just like, it's a wacky world of like, one, it makes bad predictions of human behavior because most people are not like this. And then two, it's not going to help you get any girls because like none of this shit, never in the life of has any woman been like, I wish my boyfriend was more into Red Pill stuff. That's just never been a conversation we have.
Well, there is, I think that if I had to give them the truth in it is that, and I think this is unfortunate, is like there are women who respond well and with a more commitment to being cheated on. That doesn't mean these are
that's got to be like the
damaged people,
a crazy exception.
Yes, and you know, I've spoken. They have the way that Red Pill describes relationships, in my opinion, is like two traumatized people just.
That's what it sounds like. When I listen to a lot of people, it sounds a lot like
they're going to take all your money and they're
Yeah.
going to do all this. It's like, that happens. And you can point out examples. Like, there are also a lot of divorces that don't do that. There
Yeah.
are people that walk away and don't make that decision. There are people that
people talk so much about like alimony, destroying. Alimony is like 10% of all
Yes.
divorces. It's not like the most common thing in the world.
And
you
if
know?
your world matches that worldview, I see why it's very appealing. But it actually just says less about the world and more about the people that you draw into your own life through the way that you are being. If everyone that you interact with is into super high status, flashy men, and doesn't give a shit about the type of personality you have, and you make a conclusion that this is what women are, this is what the women in the pond that you are fishing in are like, and that are responding to you are like.
There's a really frustrating line, and it was like one of the biggest self-reports I've ever seen, but I don't think anybody realized it. Fresh and Fit did an episode with Valuetainment where they had like 40 girls on, and it was just them and like Fresh and Fit. And one of the lines that Myron uttered to one of the girls was like, listen, if you want to be seen in this world as a man, you've got to be a high achiever. Like all the men that you see here, we're only here because we achieved high. You're just here because you're a girl. And it's like, it's your show. You invited them.
Your show.
Like, do you think people make it to Oprah just because they're an attractive woman? Do you think people make it to like a late night show or a late show just because they're attractive? Like, that's your choice, you know? So if you keep surrounding yourself with those types of people, the philosophy becomes self-fulfilling. I remember the first...
it is your world, because nobody's world is 7 billion people. Their world is 70 people. And then they talk about the world. And like, we've got everybody talking about the world, it's like the people discussing what an elephant is, you know, all trying to make an agreement. It's like, no, you're just describing your small section of it that you have selected for.
By
who you are.
I remember the first time I left Fresh and Fit, I remember thinking like, holy shit, if all women were like the women on this show, I would be super red pill. Yeah, 100%. I get it now. If these are the women that they bring on all the time,
Yes, and it is not a mistake that they are here. They are here in the way that they are because they were invited by you, attracted by you. Let's talk about game, or like, you know, how should, I don't know if have you approached dating in a way that is different, or, you know, if you were to share, because I don't know that there's a lot of other competing narratives out there.
Man, I don't know. It's like, again, I don't think I have like a wholly cohesive narrative. There's just like a lot of little things that I've kind of like learned over the years. I guess like one is I know who I am, and I know the kind of people I attract, and I know the kind of people that wouldn't be attracted to me. So like, I'm very much into like kind of like...
This is super important, by the way. And I don't think this is discussed, because the idea of red pill is this is who women are. And what you're saying is there are lots of different people attracted to lots of different things. Some women are going to go to the gym, they're going to get really swole, and they're going to date the guy that is 300 pounds of raw muscle. And that is going to be every boyfriend they have. Somebody else is going to date every skinny rocker. Somebody else is going to date people that are deadbeats and they just need to caretake. Like,
if there's a girl on Tinder and she's like, I need a guy with 36-inch arms, it's like 6'4". Like, I'm not going to be barking up that tree. I know. So there's a certain type of girl that I like, and there's a certain type of girl that likes me. I tend to like maybe kind of like nerdier, kind of like alt girls, people that are like very aggressive, like career, intellectual driven girls. Like this tends to be the crowd, game people, maybe politics people. These tend to be like the crowd that I do well with. And so that's kind of like the crowd that I navigate through the most. That's not exclusively what I'm, what I can score with. It just depends on
why
like,
is it the crowd that you do well in? I think it's because that is reflective of where you would be otherwise.
I mean, like on a first date, typically my style of seduction sounds so cringe. Conversation, I'll say, is I'm usually talking to somebody. Usually my goal is to ask a person a lot of questions to figure out like what's kind of like your life, what are the things you're into, what are you passionate about. Like my goal is through conversation to figure out like what are some things that you feel really strongly about, maybe you don't get to talk about a lot that you'd like to, and how can I listen to you talk about these things and like engage with it like in a funny way that shows that I'm like charismatic, charming, humorous, but also that I'm like really listening to you and giving you an opportunity to kind of like talk about things that are important to you, right? And then also gives me an opportunity to showcase my personality at the same time, right? If I'm talking to a woman, she says she's got like a huge passion for teaching, and I'm like, oh, like what grade, like why? She's like, oh, middle schoolers, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm bringing up like, oh, I've got a 12-year-old son, I would kill myself if I had to deal with like 20 of them at a time, right? It's a funny joke. She knows how difficult it is dealing with kids, right? Things to like, So like that style of conversation will be where I go. There's a lot of like personality traits I have that I think are really good for getting people to open up to me. I'm very non-judgmental. I try to be really emotionally communicative. Like I'm sensitive to certain
non-judgmental
topics.
is very, very powerful.
What?
Especially on non-judgmental.
Oh yeah, non-judgmental is super. Yeah, people generally feel like they can share a lot of things with me without me being judgmental about it.
I think this is even zooming out again without dogging on the red pill, especially as regards having sex. If you're a person who has a tremendous amount of judgment for women who engage in sex, and you are also a person who is going out trying to have quick sex with women,
super dumb.
Those are cross purposes, and you will exude, bleed, or otherwise really have to hide that, because some part of you is, I do not respect the women who do the thing that I am hoping that they do.
It's real dumb, yeah. I want to say like half the girls I hooked up with in California, I think, because for a while when I was in California and I was on Tinder, that was a stage of my life where I didn't want to deal with anybody that knew me online. So I removed all of my fucking online personality shit from there because I just wanted to deal with like normies or whatever. But a lot of the girls that I hooked up with were, they had like no hookups, no one night stands on their profile. And I think they're like talking and associating with people. I think it's because people feel really bad about being judged with it.
Yeah.
Like there were a couple where like, and obviously they felt safe, they felt comfortable, they felt cool, and we would do stuff, and then afterwards they're like, oh, like don't think I'm like a slut because I know this is like the second time we've seen each other or whatever. And I was like, no, it's cool, it doesn't matter. So people like people that are emotionally responsive, that are really listening. I don't fake anything for conversations. Like if I'm asking you questions because I have a genuine interest in it, and that's going to show through my engagement.
How did you develop, or was that just natural to you? Because that is very difficult for me, for a lot of people, to not smooth things over. Did that come easily to you, or was that?
What do you mean
developed?
to not smooth things over, or
to so many people, in order to fit in, they are not asking or being like, how do I show myself? They are asking, what do you want me to be? Mm-hmm. How can I figure that out and then be that for you? And I'm curious if that was just something that came easily to you, this sense of I don't fake shit.
I mean, one is that like I have a pretty strong personality. I've got a pretty strong character. I think two is that like, I think people like that. I think people like confidence, and I think people, especially women, like passion.
No, it's counterproductive to do with the thing that I described that a lot of people do.
So like there's something I noticed really early in life, in like my late teens, like early 20s, before I even got like into streaming or whatever, is it was really, really, really fun. Oh, also, and this is really lame, but the thing that helped me the most was I was always friends with lots of girls through high school because of the people that I hung out with. There was always groups of girls. So I was always really confident and comfortable talking to women. Even though I was short, had horrible acne, I didn't really have much going for me physically, but I was super funny, super charismatic, lots of experience talking to girls. Something I noticed really early on, and I probably employed this more as like a trick than more understanding what was happening. But like if I'm talking to a girl, and I'm like, oh, cool. Like, what kind of music do you listen to? And she says something like, oh, like I really like New Found Glory. If I say something like, oh my God, that's like my worst band of all fucking time. I can't believe you like, they have, every album is bad. Name like 2 good songs. If you challenge, especially like a pretty girl like that, their eyes light up and like, what do you mean? Like she's never had somebody push back against her entire life.
And the pickup artist sort of understood this. And this was the concept of a neg, which got blown out of proportion because it's not an insult. It is a disqualifier of, I am just like every other guy trying to say whatever you want.
Exactly.
Yes.
But you got to be so careful because a lot of people.
It's not an insult.
Yes. That's so important because a lot of people watch me interact with people and they're like, oh, all Destiny does is a neg. And it's like, no, if you watch conversations I have with people, they're always laughing. They're always smiling and having fun. And I'm never, like, I would never go on a first date with a girl. Like, I might go on a first date with a girl and say, like, I love your dress. My grandma has a tablecloth that looks just like it as like a joke. But I would never be like, oh my God, that dress makes you look so fat.
Yeah.
I would never say that, right? Yeah. Because one is like a funny kind of jokey thing and we can go back and forth. And especially if you've been used to dealing with simpy guys all your life, having somebody that's willing to have a backbone and give a little bit of pushback for some conversation is so much fun. But it's never going to be like, I'm trying to hurt you and make you feel bad.
Yeah.
You know?
The big difference that I noticed in myself and other people that I teach or talk to is that the way that men engage in conversation and the way that flirting occurs are just different. Men are often very logical. What time do we do here? I express that I like you. You receive that I like you. You report back to me if you like me in return. And for women, it's much more of what is occurring underneath the conversation. And if you can't detect, like what you're describing there is, somebody might see he's insulting women. That is what they like. And what is occurring in my analysis underneath that conversation is he is providing an injection of fun, emotional play into this conversation. And now we can spar playfully back and forth, which is a fun thing to do. But then that can be misinterpreted by people who don't understand the subtleties of it, of insult.
Yeah, because people will see it and they'll be like, I'm like such a nice guy to like so many girls, and this guy's a fucking asshole and he gets like all the girls.
And it's
not, even the guys that are fuckboys and assholes, and I know a lot of them that do fuck a lot of girls, be like, oh, he's an asshole and he gets the girls. When you watch them interact with girls, it's similar to what I'm saying. It's generally not them being really rude or horrible. Usually they're, even if they're being like really aggressive or kind of like insulting, it's on stuff that's not that big. Like the word, they might say like, oh, your last boyfriend was a loser or something like that, but it's like in a playful kind of way. If it was like it'll be stuff that's not like, you're a fat whore. Come fuck me, you know? Yeah.
It's a shame that, as you're talking, that feminism is associated with screeching, crying, and not like forget masculine or feminine. There are healthy virtues, and one of them is emotional attunement, the capacity to do that, the ability to feel your own emotions, to empathize with other people. That is a virtue, and that it is associated with
being weak.
Yeah.
And like being able to have those types of really challenging conversations, or to be a sounding board for somebody else to do that, requires that's a very difficult thing to do. The biological animal world definition is fairly true, but the way that it's ripped on by these communities is so false. If you look at like silverback gorillas, like think as strong as a gorilla is, it's not going to fight off 3 at once. An effective leader, like the gorilla, the leader of the alpha of the pack, is also breaking up fights.
Did you watch the chimp documentary at all?
I haven't. No.
You know, they have to groom each other,
and they do a lot of social grooming.
The beta will ask to do the grooming, but it's a reciprocal arrangement at that point. And
if you think of effective leaders in companies or whatever, they're not alpha guys that are fucking screaming at people all the time. They're usually pretty empathetic leaders. They understand the needs of other people around them, and they're doing their best to be like a leader that's responsive to the needs of their team.
Drama drives interest. You know what I mean? So I, for one, I was invested in the MLD drama. I was there. I was.
Echo chamber versus an epistemic bubble. That an epistemic bubble, you can argue that people are kind of trapped in an area where they only get like a certain type of news, right? They only see one type of thing. For people in an epistemic bubble, you can give them more information and they'll go, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. That's interesting. I never knew that before. Then you've got people in echo chambers. I want to be a role model for like thought processes, but I do a lot of stuff off the norm. I don't want to be a role model in other ways, right? Like open relationship style. I don't know if everybody should do that. I don't want to role model that for everybody. In terms of like working like 14 hours a day, I don't think that's probably healthy for most people. I'm really lucky that I can do what I love, but I don't want to role model that for people. In terms of like the engagement style that I have with people, very aggressive. I love crazy people, especially crazy girls. I like the fighting. I like the conflict. I don't want to role model that for people, right? So it's hard that in one sense, like I'd like to be more of a role model for people because I do think I'm very happy. I've been happy.
That's very insightful of you, by the way. I think, well, sorry to interrupt, but continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do want to be a role model for people, but like there's so many traits about me that I don't think most people should copy. So I don't want to be a role model in some ways as well. And that's difficult to balance. Yeah,
they work for you in the particular way that you are versus the more broadly universalizable thing that would be good for a lot of people is a different approach to their information diet and how they construct their worldview.